Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I want us to talk about how can we improve our connection with the Quran, and how can you help your son or your daughter that doesn't like to recite the Quran to love the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the Quran easy for learning, but we come to earth, we have a lot of distractions. As adults we have distractions in our life. Our kids also have distractions in their life, and anything good shaitan does not want us to do. So how do you help yourself as a parent, as an adult, and your child to love the Quran, to learn and recite the Quran? A lot of kids today, they don't want to learn the Quran. They are not motivated. But you ask the question, why is this happening? The simple answer a lot of us will give, oh, the kids are distracted. But what is distracting those kids? Why are those things distracting them? And how can the Quran come also to distract them from those things? So today, inshallah, I want to talk about 4 things that we can use as adults ourselves and as parents, tips from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on how we can build more better connection with the Quran. One of the biggest challenges a lot of Muslims have today is a lot of families and a lot of people take Quran learning as a task. So reciting the Quran or creating a time to learn the Quran becomes something they have to think over, and it doesn't come as a priority in life. The best way that we can look into the Quran is the way we cater for many things in our life. For instance, you want to be a businessman, you cater for the end goal of that business. You put in all the work. So we need to approach the Quran not as a task, but as a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of parents, I would say kids, do not understand what it means to converse with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when we as teachers and as parents help these kids learn to understand the Quran as not a chore, but as a way to converse with the Creator, then the thinking and the process of learning the Quran will be a bit different. It was not meant to be treated like a homework. Quran was not meant to be treated like a task that will be boring. Sometimes a lot of teachers and a lot of students or parents, they rush through to get to the end of the Quran. I just want to finish. And some parents, when they start and having the kids to learn the Quran, their goal is, I want my child to finish the entire Quran. I tell parents, it's not about finishing the Quran. Your child needs to learn, one, to recite the Quran, and at the same time, you also need to understand the meaning of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran in Surah Al-A'raf, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. So when you read the Quran, or when you learn the Quran, you need to listen, right? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conversing with you, talking to you? You need to be quiet so Allah can show mercy to you. Why? Because when you listen to the Quran, not just reciting and reading, you understand the meaning and you ponder upon the meaning of the Quran. It's like you conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the Quran is being recited, we need to listen and we need to pay attention to it. But how will a child or a little baby want to pay attention to the Quran? The best way is to start learning the Quran with stories. A lot of teachers felt, they just have to force down the Quran down the throat of these kids, but sometimes it doesn't work that way, even for adults. One of the most beloved way to endear the Quran to any learner is starting with the stories of the Quran. And so this is what you can use to start as a parent. When you read midnight stories for your kids, you see how they love it so much. How about you taking the Quran, you reciting the stories in the Quran, and having everyone to ponder upon the lessons from that? And this is the first approach that you can use to increase connection with the Quran. Imagine how we all use midnight story books to get attention of our kids, and they remember those stories for many, many years and months. We need to use the same approach and make the Quran conversational, not a charm. This is the first solution, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the Quran easy for learning. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We've made the Quran easy for learning, and who is going to remember the Quran? And brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy for us to learn the Quran. The stories in there, although they may be enticing and be interesting, but they pass a message. When the Quran is recited, we need to make sure we're not just listening to its recitation, but having in our hearts the message being passed, and letting the kids know Allah is speaking to them. Allah is talking to you directly. That way students can be able to ponder upon the meaning of the Quran, listen and understand. Abu Hurairah narrated a hadith from Sallam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in hadith al-Qudsi, that Ana inda dhanni abdi bi, that I am in thought with my servants when they are with me. So Allah said, when you are in reminder, or you are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah also ذكرني في نفسه. when a servant of Allah remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah ذكرته في نفسي. Allah said, I remember him in my own self as well. وإن ذكرني في ملأ ذكرته في ملأ خيرا منهم. And whenever he mentioned my name among his own associates, I also mention his name among associates which are more better than the associate of human being. So imagine when we, sit down and read the Quran and learn the stories of the Quran and circulate the message of the Quran among our kids. And this is the best approach to learn the Quran. We are using the Quran to converse to ourselves to understand what Allah wants to say. The second thing we can use to endear the Quran even to ourselves and not just the kids alone is a lot of the time many people just rush to read the Quran. For instance, adults who can recite the Quran themselves, they recite the Quran but their mind is not there. Why? Because they are just after the end goal. They're not really after getting the benefits at that point in time. So like you rush through the pages of the Quran. Allah mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Qiyamah, Allah told the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah said, لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به. Do not rush your tongue to hasten to finish reciting the Quran or to memorize the Quran. A lot of parents sometimes, they say, I want my child to learn the Quran, which is good. Or I want my child to memorize the Quran. And some people say, I want my child to finish memorizing within 3 years. This not should be the goal for parents and for us as Muslims. Our goal is not to finish memorizing. Our goal is not to finish reading. But our goal is to make sure that whatever we recite in the Quran, we understand it and we're able to apply it to our life. The Salaf, the predecessors, the Sahaba, they go to memorize 10 ayah and they will not memorize any new ayah until they understood that first 10 ayah and able to practice it in their daily life. Then they can move on to memorize the next 10 ayah to see how they are so disciplined. And this is how they learn the Quran. They didn't see the Quran as something that you need to force to the throat of kids or to the throat of the learners. A lot of teachers today, they are in haste. Parents also, they're not understanding what the kid needs to learn. It's not about you finishing the Quran. Some will say, I want my child to finish Quran. It's good to read the Quran back to back, but understanding how to read correctly. Some people, they recite the Quran, meaning you have to recite it, putting the Tajweed in there. So when you're reciting the Quran and the Tajweed is not there, like you're not reciting the Quran, please. You need to stop that. A lot of people today also, they recite the Quran, they recite so fast without applying the rules of Tajweed. And this changes the meaning of the Quran altogether. As we've been talking about for the last few weeks, about omitting some letters or pronouncing some letters wrongly, or even omitting the med in letters or different kind of rules of Tajweed, it messes up the meaning of the Quran. So we don't want to be among those who will recite the Quran and read it wrongly. Like Ibn Mas'ud used to mention in one of the saying, لا تهذ القرآن كهذا الشعر. That do not read the Quran like the poets. How the poets recite their poetry, they recite it with so fast. Sometimes they don't even care about the rules. You don't want to recite the Quran like that. وَلَا تَنْثُرُوهُ نَثْرَ الدَّقَلِ. And do not recite the Quran like the way they scatter the dates. The dates which is dried and not really good, they scatter it and try to separate it. So you don't recite the Quran like that as well. وَقِفُوا عِنْدَ عَجَائِبِهِ. Whenever you recite the Quran, you stop on amazing areas where Allah is saying something. You ponder upon that and listen and understand what it means. وَحَرِّكُوا بِهِ الْقُلُوبِ. And let it move your heart. When you recite the Quran and it's not moving your heart, you're not able to understand it, you're not reciting the Quran. وَلَا يَكُنْ هَمُّ أَحَدِكُمْ آخِرِ السُّورَةِ. And do not let the gaya or the ultimate goal of each of you when you're reciting the Quran is to get to the end of the surah. Some people, when they recite the Quran or learn, they look at, how many pages left to finish. You don't look that way when you recite the Quran. Because if you do that, it means the one you're actually reciting itself, you don't understand it, or you don't really connect to the one that you're reciting as well. So learning the Quran and reciting the Quran is not about the speed. It's about reciting it with tajweed, with tranquility, and understanding the meaning of the surah. This is why you see a lot of parents have said today, my child is not motivated to learn the Quran. Why? Because there's no tadabbur of the Quran. The kids are not understanding what the Quran message is about. It's just about reading Arabic all the time. So we need to kind of change the approach of how we learn the Quran. It's not about the speed. It's not about the way we rush to finish the Quran. My child has finished the Quran, which is the goal of many parents. No, we want to make sure the Quran is learned and understood. No matter how long it takes us. One thing that's so sure, that's certain, is to learn to recite the Quran is easy, but you don't want to have the goal that I want to recite the Quran all together within a month or within a year. Make sure you recite and pronounce it correctly. Allah mentioned the Quran and told the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, do not recite the Quran with rush. When you rush to recite the Quran, you're going to make mistakes. So make sure you read the Quran steadily without getting rushed, without rushing to recite the Quran. That's the second point, and this is what we need to understand as learners. The third thing that I want to share with us that will help us to increase our connection with the Quran, like I mentioned, is pause and reflect. So you recite an ayah, you need to make sure that ayah touches or you feel that ayah in your life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, in Surah Muhammad, أَفَلَا يَتَّدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمَّ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not reflect upon the Quran? Allah is asking the Rasul and telling us all together, do you not reflect on the Quran, or do you have a lock that has locked all the barred thoughts in your mind? أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Or is there a lock on the heart that has locked down all the evil things that you have in mind and does not allow good things to come in? Meaning, if you are reciting the Quran and you're not doing tadabbur, Quran is not going to have effect in your life. And that's why sometimes you see a lot of people, they learn the Quran, they recite the Quran, or they even memorize the Quran, but they don't have time to do tadabbur. You need to pause and reflect when you recite the Quran. Even though you're not rushing to recite the Quran, you need to make sure you pause and reflect on the meaning of the ayah that you recite in the Quran. And Allah even mentioned in Surah As-Sad, and I said, كِتَابٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ مُبَارَكٌ لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. Allah is telling the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this book, the Quran, أنزلناه, is revealed to you, full of blessing. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ, for you to reflect on its meaning. وَلِيَتَذَكَّرَ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, and so that those who are wise can remember or can serve as a reminder for them. So brothers and sisters, when you recite the Quran, you need to make sure you recite with pausing and reflection. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the hadith of Hudhayfa, he mentioned that Rasul prayed, and when he recited, إِذَا مَرَّ بِآيَةِ الرَّحْمَةِ, whenever he recites an ayah of rahmah, سأل, he asked Allah for rahmah. وَإِذَا مَرَّ بِآيَةِ عَذَابِ, when Rasul recites an ayah of adhab, ista'adha, he will ask Allah to save him from that. When also he recites وَإِذَا مَرَّ بِآيَةٍ فِيهَا تَنْزِيهٌ لِلَّهِ, whenever he recites an ayah where it is Allah's exaltation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sabbaha, he exalts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how the Rasulullah read the Quran, and this is how he leads the salam. So we need to recite the Quran, pause and reflect, not rushing. And last tip I want to give you all and myself as a reminder, when we learn the Quran, to make the Quran connect with us in our mind, is small consistent habits. I cannot overemphasize how this is so important. You need to have some level of consistency, and I've said this before, you need to build a time. Start with once in a week that you can help yourself become consistent, to maybe read the meaning or learn something of Tajweed, or get a time of the week, if 30 minutes, to practice and make it consistent. Rasulullah mentioned a hadith of Aisha anha. He said, أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَامُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ, that the best of deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you can do, that Allah is so loving, are those deeds that are consistent, even they are small. If they are really small effort, make it consistent. And this is the key. And when we do that often, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless our effort and make it easy for us to learn, and your kids to learn to recite the Quran as well. So you're not waiting or listening for your child to be perfect from day one. You're not wanting them, of course, to stay too long either, but you want them to learn with consistency and not being in a rush. If it's 30 minutes in a week or 5 minutes in a day, or just pick a time. If you're an adult, you can create maybe 10 minutes after Fajr to read an ayah and do tadabbur of the ayah. These are the 4 tips I want to share with us today, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the Quran spring of the hearts of believers. It will make our nerves calmer and make our life easy. And if a lot of us today are not connecting with the Quran, it's a big problem. So we need to find a solution on how we can connect deeper with the Quran. To recap what I've said today, that can help us connect deeper with the Quran, even for our kids. 1, we need to make sure we learn the Quran, not learning as a chore, but as a conversation, as a book that we read to learn some things from there. So for instance, you have storybooks you read to your kids, they learn, they ponder upon the meaning. You can do that for the Quran as well. The other thing that you can do is whenever you recite the Quran, avoid rushing and avoid thinking that, oh, I want to finish the entire Quran by a year or 2 years, or I want my child to finish the entire Quran. Instead of focusing on the speed, why not focus on getting it to perfect it, recite it, the Quran in the best way, in a measured tone and recitation, observing the rules of Tajweed. This is the second thing that we all need to think of. The third thing is we need to pause and reflect on the Quran. Even when you recite with gentleness and low speed, make sure you have tadabbur of the Quran. Pause and reflect like the Rasulullah used to do. And the fourth advice is we need to make sure that we are consistent when we learn the Quran. You cannot learn today and skip it until next year or until next month. So if you're interested in making sure that you build a consistent habit for your child and for yourself as an adult who want to perfect Quran recitation, we have a system that we've designed that actually helps students learn to read on time within 4 months. They are not reciting the entire Quran. They learn to pronounce perfectly, recite with gentleness, learn to recite with correct pronunciation, with tajweed mostly. We're not getting them to read the entire Quran in 4 months, but we teach them the skills to read anywhere in the Quran so that the kids can ponder, they can do tadabbur, they can pause and reflect on the Quran that they are learning, not just the goal of reciting the entire Quran within a certain number of years, but we're getting them to learn to recite on their own so there can be tadabbur and there can be a way to converse with the Quran on their own, inshallah. There's a link below this video. Tap to see how we can help. If it makes sense to you, schedule your admission call with us. Subscribe to this channel, inshallah, to learn more about Quran connections and parenting with the Quran, inshallah. I would love to have you next week, inshallah, in our next episode of our sessions of Quran and parenting, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.